Good morning. Can you hear me? All right. Good. How are we doing today? We're doing good, aren't we? We got a good smile for today. What a beautiful Saturday. You notice when you're in here how nice it is outside? In case you get bored, I don't think you will be, there's a little dog show out around the corner here in case you want to watch dogs. We got some healthy people here. I want to welcome you to the SDP organization that does a wonderful job, Medical Discovery Institute. And maybe you're going to discover something today. We have a special meeting of, we got 3 experts, 3 members of this program. And they got some good messages for you and also some questions, and maybe you can help them out. And then following that, we're going to have our networking breakout session where we're going to talk about 4 major treatments: radiation, surgery, active surveillance, and hormone therapy. So we're going to break up into 4 different quadrants. I'll be down front in case you have any question that doesn't fit in that area, particularly your newcomers. And want to thank the folks for these facilities. We also have facilities for you guys that have prostate cancer. I know what your situation is. Just go out the back door here and down the hallway, and there's some wonderful facilities there for you. And come on in. We got room for you. Okay. Here are the volunteers that make this program work. And let me start off with our president, Lyle. Lyle, would you wave to our group here? There he is. There's the guy that is our leader. And one of our speakers has very fond memories of Lyle and how Lyle has helped him. So you'll hear that story. And then we got Gene, who's in charge of support. He's my boss. He tells me what to do. And one of these days, he's going to tell his story. He's had every treatment except chemotherapy, so he knows all about the side effects. And it's a wonderful story. He's still alive and kicking. Then that's me there, and I'm chairman of the program selection committee. In case you've got any suggestions of who'd make a good speaker for you, let me know, and we'll contact that person. Thank you. And Bill Manning is also a speaker, but he's back there. You don't get to see much of him, but he has a story to tell about his active surveillance. That's his key thing. He's one of our longest and most active surveillance guys. And also he has a story he wants to share with you that we need to hear about. He lost his home in the fire, and he has some things that he'd like to share, lessons learned from that you might benefit from. And John Tassi, John is way in the back there. He's also going to be substituting as an assistant part-time librarian. Okay, but also he does the website, does a wonderful job. We have a new website, check it out. And where's Steve? Steve, there he is. He's the guy that does the newsletter. And then where's Bill Lewis? Where are you, Bill? Bill's not here, I guess, but he's the one that summarizes the meeting. And so it's a challenge for him to summarize 3 speakers, and particularly when he's not here. But he's going to get a video disc, so he can summarize it by watching that. And you can watch it too by paying $10. And the thing about the DVDs is it includes all the charts and all that from, for example, last month we had a wonderful talk on radiation therapy and all the various aspects. We had 4 doctors, and that was a wonderful presentation. And okay, Bill Bailey is not here. Bill Bailey is at home. He has the flu and he decided not to share it with you.
No, he was here and just went home 5 minutes.
Right, but he didn't touch anybody. Right. Okay. And so we have Renee and John who are going to be down here and helping you select DVDs and some of the books that are for available at rental. And then we got standing in the doorway. He does a real good job of leaning against that jamb. Notice that there? And he's got a wonderful smile, our buddy Jim. Gilda, who's our greeter, and he has a wonderful greeting for you. So everybody's a volunteer. We have 9 here. We have an opening for a 10th person in case you want to join us, see me or see Gene. Okay, the newcomer package. Did every newcomer to this meeting get a new package of information? There. Anybody missing that? Okay. And there's a yellow sheet. We'd like you to fill it out and bring it up here at the end of the meeting. And Jim will give you a call later in the week. See if Gene, that birthday last month is catching up with me. Gene will give you a phone call, and maybe Jim too. I don't know. Okay, here we go. It's a wonderful kit. It's got the glossary terms and information that you need to know. And okay, what's the purpose of this support group? This is a support group for you. We're not here to support the doctors or the lawyers or anything like that. We're to support you. And the way we do that is to guide you to become your own case manager. You have to manage your case. You're the one that has to ask the questions of the doctor. He may not, he only has about 10 minutes with you. He has 3,000 patients. So you're the one that has to keep a copy of all your reports and all that put in a notebook. You should see John's notebook. It's that thick. He takes it with him to the doctor and he goes through and answers questions and checks them off and so forth. You should do the same. You need to have that discipline because your doctor may not. But we're not a substitute for your doctor. If anything, we might provide questions you want to ask the doctor. What about this and how come that and so forth. So that's the purpose of this group, is to help you become your own case manager. And what do you get from us? What do we get from the $10 you're going to put in the basket? Well, we got this website. It has all kinds of up-to-date information. We have a library, look at this, and papers and research reports. We got the newsletter with some corny jokes about prostate and some really up-to-date information on technology. We have an outreach program in case you want to have one of us come and talk to your Rotary Club or a church group or whatever. We got a snappy 20-minute presentation we can give. And we'll be happy to do that. And we have, of course, monthly meetings. You're aware of that, or you wouldn't be here. Okay, I want you to participate in raising your hand. This is for the new members. And just to remind us, how many are here for the first time? Raise your hand, please. Very good. Once you know you're welcome, and keep coming back. We got name tags on today, so you can come up to us and say hi or write down the name. And if you want to, give the other members a phone call if they talked about something that interests you. The purpose of all this is for you to network. And how many have been recently diagnosed in the last 6 months? Okay. How many have had prostate cancer for 1 year? Okay. And now you 1 year guys, see how many have it more than that, so you can look forward to it. Up to 4 years, raise your hand. 4 years? Okay. 5 to 10 years. Look at the hands going up there. Okay. 11 to 15. Okay. Now, how many have higher than 15 years? Raise your hand. Okay. Where's Jack? Jack, you're here today? There he is. Okay. How many years now? 28. 28 years. Okay. Look at the smile on his face. Yeah. And his wife has a smile too. That's a better measure. Okay. Welcome back. And okay, let's do our survey of treatments. Okay. How many have not had a treatment but are now on active surveillance? Raise your hand. All right. Now, how many have had surgery, prostate surgery of all kinds? Okay. Now let's see if we get radiation. How many have had radiation? See, this is where we get a shift now. Instead of surgery being the gold standard, it's getting to be radiation. How many are on ADT, hormone therapy? I am too. Okay. We got a bunch of you. How many are on chemotherapy? Have been on chemotherapy. I was trying to get John to raise his hand. Okay. That's an indication that these others are working. How many under new treatments? Zypigo, Provenge, and Cryo. There goes a hand there. Okay, so, okay. Now, how many have had recurrence? See, that's part of the program. It recurs. In my case, it took 10 years. And, okay. How many are undecided what to do next? Where's Mike Brekka? You got your hand up, Mike? Okay, Mike's going to talk about the decision factors and so forth. So, okay. We need your support. We need, on an average, if we go broke, we're a nonprofit, but we go broke if we don't get, on an average, $10 a person. So that's as a guidance. If you can't do it, we understand that. If you want to donate more, we're going to turn you down. No, if you want to donate more, we love bills with zeros on them. And we have no medical or religious affiliation, so we're going to be passing the basket and pass them all the way down and back. You remember when you were in church how that works? Yeah, that's what we're doing here. These are by the way, they're tax deductible. I know April 15th you're going to regret by not giving more last year. So you can make up for it now. Okay, here's our 6 steps of our program. Let me do a quick review. Get early detection, get that PSA early, get it when you're 50, 55. If you men have a son, he's probably around that age. Remind him, because the probability of his having prostate cancer is higher than the average. So tell your son to get that PSA test. And then if you're going to have diagnostics, get high definition. And so then you're able to get a targeted biopsy. And then you're really going to know your Gleason score, which the Gleason score, I hope you all know your Gleason score. That's a key to what kind of treatment you should have, whether you should go on active surveillance or go on treatment, and then what kind of treatment. There's 16 different kinds of prostate cancer treatment. What's the best for you? Best for you is the important thing is quality of life. Some treatments can kill the cancer and may also potentially kill you. So it depends upon your quality of life, what you like, and how you want to live your life. That's important. And you need to know about that. What's new? This is a minute on case management here. I got some new words, at least new words for me. One is undifferentiated. How many have heard that word before? All right. It was mentioned last year in this room, undifferentiated, by Dr. Galis. How about perineural invasion? How many have heard that one? Okay. And these are new to me in the past year because I find I got these. And this is for about 15% of you that have very aggressive long-term cancer. I've had cancer 20 years, so mine has been percolating at a pretty good clip, but I've been doing very well in the treatment and the doctor's advice. Undifferentiated, it's a term used to describe cells or tissue that do not have specialized or structures or functions. Undifferentiated cancer cells often grow and spread quickly. Now you've seen our charts our doctors show you where there's the Gleason 1, 2, 3 through 5. And the ones are nice little perfect circles and on down to the real messy looking 5, Gleason 5. I have undifferentiated cells. They don't have a cell structure. It looks like a grain of sand, just a pile of sand. It's very little tiny, just sort of gray dots. That's it. It spreads quickly, so I have to watch that. Mine just had a PSA yesterday. It's growing. The key thing about it, though, that I was not aware of, is because it's undifferentiated, it does not generate the PSA that a normal Gleason 5 or 4 and so forth would. It doesn't, because it's not functioning well, but it's still cancerous. So the PSA tends to be very low. Mine was 0.3 and now it's 0.5. Because it's undifferentiated, it's probably much higher. It's not just generating the PSA level. The key thing is it's rising. Perineural invasion. I love the writing here. Prostate cancer has a propensity to invade and grow along the nerves, actually in the sheath of the nerve, a phenomenon called perineural invasion, PNI. Recent studies suggest that the presence of PNI in prostate cancer has been associated with cancer aggressiveness. This is again for that small number of you who have aggressive cancer to be aware of that. I like the phrasing here, the medical phrasing, that the studies suggest and then has been associated. You know, these are, the reason it's worded that way is controversial. The controversy is one, should you treat it? And is that treatment effective? And then lastly, could it be damaging elsewhere? And, so I have that because I'm old and I had cancer for so long. So these two words you may, or three words, you may find in a pathology report. If you see it there, ask your doctor about it and so forth. Now, let's talk about a new book. Let's go to our agenda, and Gene's going to step up here and talk about a new book. Come on up, Gene. You got it to work?
No, I'll just use this one.
There's a question back here, if the volume could be raised a little bit.
Maybe our primary mic is not working, and I don't know if we can raise that or not. Can you hear me well off of this? I'm talking through this thing here. You know, John, if there's a way to raise the volume on this? Huh?
Better now. Better, much better.
Well, I'm talking through this. Maybe that's the thing to do. Okay, I just wanted to make a quick note. We've had on sale here for a long time Invasion of the Prostate Snatchers by Mark Schultz, and they've just come out with a brand new book, and it's called The Key to Prostate Cancer. And it includes chapters of 30 different doctors, including Dr. Schultz, Dr. Turner, Dr. Lamb, all of which are part of prostate oncology specialists. I've got some advanced copies here. We'll have a couple of them available for checkout. The others that we have available will sell for $25. They're not yet available, and they won't be available till the spring, I'm told, on Amazon. Couldn't think of that word. But you can buy it through another site if you'd want to, but our price is still going to be cheaper. It's called key2pc.com. T-O is spelled out. Because the name of the book is The Key to Prostate Cancer. Key2pc.com. And just, I've made my way through most of it. It's well over 400 pages long, and I'm always worried about if I'll ever make it through that many pages. But it's wonderfully presented in that you can read the first part and get some general information. Dr. Schultz came out with a grading system quite some time ago called Shades of Blue. And so this book is structured according to whatever shades of blue you are. Of course, I'm the worst, darkest shade of blue there is. But you read along, and then there's an index there, and it says if you're shades of blue, skip all of these intermediate chapters and go to this chapter, and then the final chapter is all about lifestyle and diet and so forth. So it's very well done, because you don't have to read the whole thing. What you can do is read the portions that relate specifically to where you stand in your type of cancer. It's a wonderful book, and I'm really gaining a lot by it. Another one is that there's a flyer out there on the front on a seminar coming up on March the 15th. It's going to be right here in this room, put on by Stanford Burnham, SBP. People do this. One of the speakers is one of Lyle's favorite people. but there'll be a Nicholas Cosford, a PhD, who's a scientist. Interestingly, a patient is going to be speaking, but that patient has to be the chairman of the board of SBP. So that's quite interesting. And then Dr. Christopher Kane will be involved in that. So that may be worth attending that. So that's enough of that. But I highly recommend that book. Hey.
Somebody left their keys out in the lobby.
Oh, check and see if you've still got your keys.
No more new keys.
Let's, is this better than the throat mic?
Oh, yeah.
All right, okay, so I'm not gonna pin it on your speaker, so just get close to the mic here. You'll probably be closer than I am.
That is when you turn your head.
Yeah, all right, go like that. Okay, I just want to show you a breakout session. We got radiation over there, hormone therapy over here. In the back, we got surgery and active surveillance back there.
I can't go back there.
You're okay, all right.
I have to go over here.
All right, you go over there, and I don't have, Denny couldn't make it today, and why don't we meet down in front, so the radiation people, and I'll also handle newcomers. And so that's what we're going to do, and we'll have 30 minutes of being able to do that. And so let's go back here. Here's our panel of experts. Bill Pitts, he's going to be, his treatment is cryoablation. Don't have too many, but he's got a really good success story about it. One of the things, see, this goes back, and I just wanted to highlight, this goes back to 2001. And he had a PSA of 2.5. And back in those days, I don't know why, but they did a biopsy on him and then wanted to do surgery. That's what a PSA at 2.5. That's known as too early detection and too early suggestion of having surgery. The key thing that he did, he came to this meeting. And he learned he had time, and he was counseled by our buddy Lyle and others here. And it's a really great story, and it covers all 6 elements of our program. So come on up here, Bill.
Yes.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. So, like all of you, I've done my bout with, and I still am observing and watching prostate cancer. It's something that we are alerted to, and it sticks around. But I am happy to say today that life is good for me. I've been 7 years with a PSA of right around 1. Have a network of friends that are good. I've been able to stay active. I have a lot of to-dos on my list that I'm going to be doing. A lot of adventures in the world I want to take. And I've got a lovely lady that wants to do with me, so it don't get me no better than that, huh?
There you go.
Yeah, as George said, in 2001, PSA of 2.5, I went in for a normal physical, and PSA was taken, and I was referred to a Kaiser urologist, and he suggested a biopsy, but he left it up to me. A friend of mine said, oh, he had a biopsy, it was no big deal. I had words for him afterwards. Come on, that was painful. But the news was the worst. I had prostate cancer. It was shocking, and it was depressing, and it was put me in a little bit of state of panic. I learned early in life that I did not need to take a doctor's diagnosis as that and final. And so right away I started looking for something different other than a month to decide whether I wanted an operation, or whether I wanted radiation. Those are the two options given to me. So I had a Gleason score of 3.3, and looked for something else. A friend of mine was a Christian Science fellow. Didn't believe in a lot of as you're aware in Christian Science, they don't believe a lot of doctors and medical treatment today. And so he went to a clinic called the Livingston Clinic that's got out of business, I don't think because they were lacking in business, because of management problems when Dr. Livingston died. But anyway, they treated cancer with non-invasive treatment and diet. And so this guy tried that, and he was doing that for a while. He recommended that. So I called them, and they said, yeah, we treat prostate cancer. And I said, can you give me the name of some folks guys who have been treated and who are willing to talk to me on the phone? And one of the names they gave me was that of Bill Ditka. Anybody remember Bill Ditka in our group? You do, Lyle? Yeah. He's a great guy. And he's no longer with us on this earth, but his influence has stuck. He advised me to come to this group right away. And that was the best advice anybody ever gave me as far as prostate cancer goes. So I attended the meeting and found out there's a bunch of intelligent guys here who were mavericks like me, who didn't just take the word from a doctor and say, this is what you got to do, follow my advice. I think you wouldn't be here if you weren't a bit of a maverick. I went on a plan of plant-based diet for a while. Found I didn't know too much about eating vegetarian-wise, and started losing a lot of weight. I don't have a lot of weight to lose, and then I went on then I added fish and chicken to that diet, and I was advised to get an oncologist instead of a urologist. I was also advised of a study done at UC San Francisco, where they're using an MRI to check for cancer in cancer patients. Lyle and I both were in that study. The great thing about it was you just get your body to San Francisco and they would do it, and you could call and later on get the results. And it continued to be good results for me for the 4 years I did it, that the cancer was maintained. It was still in the prostate, so that's what I wanted to hear. And then I was also advised to go to Dr. Bond in Ventura. How many here have gone to Dr. Bond? Okay. And that's a good way to monitor with active surveillance. And I did that for several years. We'd take a trip up there once a year. Yes?
What did you do there?
He does a color Doppler, and he will determine blood flow to the lesion. And he can tell you by examining the color Doppler if that's something that you should be concerned about or if it's changed a lot. And so for, I would say 5 years, mine looked pretty damn good. All of a sudden, the PSA started to rise. And about 2011, it reached 9.3. He did a biopsy, and he said he recommended treatment. And so I came on back to my home here. And consulted with one of my fellow buddies here, Lyle. We had coffee, we talked about it. And both of us agreed that probably I could wait another year because I wasn't quite sure what kind of treatment I wanted. And so I went on a vegan diet. I had done visual imagery when I was a young kid. I just kind of learned to do this myself. I imagined the cancer shrinking in my prostate. I drank green tea and turmeric. I did a just combination of things. Turmeric and green tea are both highly antioxidants. And I was told, one book I read, a woman recommended that for breast cancer. Breast cancer is also caused by hormones, and so ours is caused by male sex hormones. I was thinking, why not give it a try? So I did that. And actually, within a few months, my PSA leveled off and it started to go down. But it was still high, and so I was still looking for treatment. So I walked into one of our meetings one day, and Dr. Bond and Dr. Ukimura were doing a presentation on focal is the key part here, cryoablation. How many of you are familiar with focal cryoablation or cryoablation at all? Okay, good. For those of you that aren't, I'll just give you a brief one on it. It's the idea of going in with a color Doppler, seeing where the lesion is, going in with a probe, taking that lesion out with being frozen, and of course the part of the prostate the cancer is in is frozen too, but it's minimally invasive. So I set up an appointment with Dr. Hukimura, who had been trained by Dr. Bond at USC, went in to see him, and I said, this is what I want. I want the least invasive treatment that's effective. And since my cancer was in one location in my prostate, he felt that I was a good candidate for it, and that I would be continent, and that I would have been able to find an erection with Viagra and with Viagra. So I thought, why not? And Cialis as needed. So I chose to do that. And for me, it became an outpatient experience. I went in one day and was able to go home that night. And he's located at USC. A few days later, I went back and he pulled out the catheter. I was able to pee and stop and pee right away, and it's remained that way. And he was correct with a little Viagra and Cialis, that's worked fine too. So it's been 6-7 years of a PSA of around 1. It hasn't gone up. I've been pleased. And I don't know why it's not more popular than it is. It just doesn't seem to get the attention that some of the treatments have gotten. Dr. Ukimura, unfortunately, has moved back to Japan, and Dr. Bond is doing the treatment. For those of you who are interested, you can Google the Prostate Institute of America in Ventura. Bond no longer takes Medicare or insurance. So his examination of you, where he do a color Doppler, possibly more, but usually a color Doppler is $500, and he will perform focal cryoablation if you wish, if you're a good candidate. And his fee is about $1,800. And the medical cost for the hospital and supplies and facilities can be covered by insurance and can be covered by Medicare. So is that enough information about,
Who's not a good candidate? You said you were a good candidate. Why were you
I was a good candidate if I had cancer on both sides of my prostate. I might not be such a good candidate because more of the prostate would be taken out and more nerve damage.
Would you clarify that? They don't take it out. They freeze
They
it.
freeze it. More would be frozen.
They don't remove it.
No, but it's dead. It's frozen. Yeah. And your body eventually vacates the dead tissue.
You have one more slide.
Okay. So it works for me. I would do it over again in a flash. This group I felt I was led to this group. It was just what I needed. Got all the information I ever needed here. There's more information here in this group than any doctor or clinic can give you. I've always watched diet for one reason or another, so it was no big deal for me to go on a diet. I eat no red meat or dairy now. I exercise. I've always been active and will continue to do that. I believe that helps a lot. I practice visualization of the prostate staying intact and not being invaded. And I do that for me and for my daughters and for other people. I believe in prayer and I meditate. Those are things that help me. Just tossing that out. Yes?
Did you investigate focused laser ablation?
I didn't. I don't know whether it was around then. It wasn't then, Lyle says.
What was your question?
Did I investigate focal laser ablation?
It was not available
At that time.
At that time.
It would be interesting. Yeah.
My memory may be failing me, but maybe it was somebody else, but did you have a second cryo treatment 10 years later or something like that?
No, this is it.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's somebody in the group that did.
That could be considered. Yes.
You had a slide up with a Gleason 7, and you got a second opinion for a 6. What was the time frame on that? Was that your first visit to Vaughn or just before your cryo?
Second visit to Vaughn, it went up, and he did a biopsy in addition to the color Doppler. Targeted biopsy, yeah.
Targeted. So that's why
Lyle's correcting me again, and he will do that to you. But he knows a lot. But don't let him know that. Yeah.
Was there a maximum Gleason score that if they went beyond that, they would not treat with cryo?
I don't know that. I wasn't told that. Of course, I was mainly interested in me. And so I said, with what I present to you, what can you do? And Yukimura, I felt some people have a difficult time understanding him. I'd spent a lot of time overseas, and I was able to understand him quite well. And he reassured me that everything went as he said it would. I had a lot of confidence in the guy. I'm sorry he's still not here.
Know roughly where the tumor was and whether it was a volume issue or not?
I don't have that data in my head. I can go back to if you want to see me later, I brought along some of the data I had from that time. Yeah. Yes?
Your PSA was how much? You said it was...
PSA went up to 9.3.
Okay. Just wondering if, and I've spoken to doctors, and if you have a high PSA, like in the 20s, and you come up negative, what indication is that?
Okay, I'm going to toss that out. Did you hear what he said? Okay, if you have a PSA that's 20 and there's no indication of cancer, what do you do with that? Where do you go with that?
Well, in today's world, you should go get an MP MRI. Multiparametric MRI, which is the best new imaging tool. And if your doctor doesn't know what it is, get another doctor.
Did you do an MP MRI? And what did they determine? There you go. Good news. Yes.
Did you get a volume of your total prostate?
Yeah, and I can't remember what it was,
Yeah, here
but the results came out negative, and they said just to keep a watch on the PSA number, but there's no guarantee that that number is going to give you any indication that you have cancer. We have to go through more process of investigation.
Okay, let's give an applause. Thank you. Next we have Bill Brekka, who does not have all the answers. Michael.
Good morning, I'm Michael Brekka. This is actually the third or fourth time I've presented to this group. I presented after I had my first set of treatments, and then I presented about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, when there was an indication things were coming back. And I'm at an interesting time right now. I'm not presenting anything that is, an absolute decision. I'm almost really in a position of looking for feedback and input because I'm at a decision-making point right now. It's a little bit about myself. So I'm 59, married, 3 kids in their 20s. For some reason, they all still live at home. But that's a sign of our times. Okay, so in the mid-2008 is when I first started getting indication that I had something going on and my PSA was getting over 3.5. And then I ended up going through till about 2011 when it became clear something was going on. I had some biopsies done, ended up 6 samples. They all pretty much all came back positive with either 4+3 or 3+3. So it's clear there was something going on there. My options, we've all talked about, active surveillance, radiation, radical prostatectomy, radiation, hormone, HIFU, cryoablation, other alternative methods. And the interesting thing is back in 2011, some of the options available now weren't around back then or weren't prevalent back then. So things have obviously changed quickly. In 2011, in blue are all the different doctors I talked to over about a 90-day period. I talked to about a dozen different doctors. I'm kind of an analytical guy. So I went around and talked to everybody I could get in touch with. Many names that you guys recognize here, Lyle and some of the doctors that have presented here. It was actually kind of funny. I actually had seen Dr. Kane, spoke to Lyle, and he cussed me out for stopping with Dr. Kane. He said, you idiot, what are you doing? You need to go talk to Dr. Bond. And so I decided to listen to him. Thank you, Lyle. And went up and saw Dr. Bond and, paid out of pocket. Figured, and I paid a lot of people out of pocket. I was at the point where, I had Kaiser insurance and, the option wasn't great as far as what they were presenting to me. So I went around and talked to all the doctors, and if I needed to pay I paid Dr. Kane $500 for an hour of his time. I said, you're not covered, but I need an expert. So I went around and paid people to tell me their opinion. Dr. Bond was probably the best investment, and so he did the color Doppler ultrasound with biopsies. It definitely was painful. It was not a fun experience. But that was probably the best appointment I went to, was getting true information about where my cancer was, how much I had, and which way it was going. And so it showed, certainly a pretty high Gleason score. And this is actually the scans that he did. So this shows truly what we were looking at and where the cancer was located and where it was going. and he does a little diagram. And the key for me was that the cancer was moving towards my urethral sphincter. And he said, if you do surgery, you're going to be incontinent, or they're not going to get it all. So it's your choice. But he highly recommended doing radiation. And so once that decision was made, I went back to Kaiser, and at the time, Kaiser was not doing radiation. They referred me to UCSD, and that's where I ended up with A.J. Munt, and went through that process. So I decided to do the combination ADT and radiation. A little bit more about some of the Lupron shots that I got, the radiation treatment, the time frame. But I did hormone therapy. They gave me a Lupron shot. It was like a 3-month shot. And then I had my radiation treatment kind of in the middle, and then a second hormone shot. So over a period of about 6 months, I was under Lupron. And then they did the radiation for, I want to say it's 9 weeks. Every morning I'd go in there and get zapped. And then the treatment was over. And the results, initially were great. I mean, the Lupron really knocked it down. And so it was clear, the testosterone had an effect on my cancer. And so Lupron right away dropped it down to less than 0.1. And it stayed down all the way through my treatment. I had my radiation treatment for about 9 weeks. And so around 2012 is when all this was occurring. And it stayed down for a long time. It stayed down through 2012 until around 2014, it started ticking up. And that's where I was like, okay, well, it's not down at 0.1 or 0.4. Something's going on. And so I kept an eye on it, and what I started seeing was it was increasing. And over a period of time, it's now at 5.14. And so it was clear something was happening, it was coming back. And for some reason, I kind of had a feeling it was going to. I just kind of had this feeling, and maybe I wasn't using enough of my positive energy to keep it contained, but I had this feeling it would come back, but I was confident that science has evolved enough to where there would be more options available for treating it. That's a chart of my PSA. As you can see, it's ticked up. And so what I've done is, the most important thing is the imaging, finding out what do I have, how much, where is it. And so I've had CT scans, PET scans, Aximum prostate scan, a multiparametric MRI, a guided biopsy. And the guided biopsy, they did 20 different samples. They all came back positive. The Gleason score is a little different when you have radiation because things are kind of fried in there a little bit, but they try to give you some bit of a relevant Gleason score. And so mine was 3 + 4 is 7. But the key is, and through all the scans I've had done, is that it's still contained in the prostate, and it is reoccurring in the same area, which is interesting. It hasn't spread outside the prostate, hasn't gone into my bones or my lymph nodes, as far as they can tell with the scanning, and I haven't chosen to really chase it down. I've just taken all the different scans I've had done and say, okay, let's just focus on this. And so with radiation, there is a percentage of failure that can occur. It's 15 to 20, 25%. And so that's me. I'm in that percentage. And so now I know what I have, where it is, and where it's not, as far as I can tell. And my physical conditions, I don't really have incontinence. I'm not impotent. Every now and then I'll take a Viagra type of medication, but I'm probably, I consider myself about 70% good, which is, considering getting fried with radiation and everything I've been through, it's probably not that bad. But it does have an effect on what my treatment options are going forward. A lot of the doctors will say, there's a test, and I forget what it's called. It's a questionnaire you fill out about urinating and erections, and it gives you a score. You add up the 1s and 2s and 3s, and I'm about a 13 to 15, depending on when I take it. And they said, well, if you're over a 16, it kind of affects what plan we want to use for you. So I still have some options available. So this is a little bit funny. Some of the options are, going back to more radiation, which, I've been zapped. And so they said, you really shouldn't get a whole lot more radiation. You've already been zapped. So the IMRT really isn't a great choice. Brachy, which is the seeds, is an okay choice, but still they're applying radiation. HDR, another version of it, from a radiation standpoint, is actually a decent option. And then there's the other treatments, cryo, HIFU, surgery. I mean, actually, I got referred back to getting surgery, which every other publication I've read is like, once you've had radiation, don't bother trying to get surgery because it's a very difficult procedure. I can go back on an ADT, which I haven't done yet. And going with an ADT, yes, it would probably knock it down, but there's a propensity that the cancer cells that are not dependent on testosterone may grow and get stronger. And so the recommendation was, let's use that as a later approach. Let's try to get rid of it first and then come back if we need to with an ADT. And the interesting thing is, all the doctors have told me, you know what, you've got prostate cancer, it's something you're gonna have to deal with for the rest of your life. We're gonna knock it down, you'll get 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and it's likely it's gonna come back. So you're just gonna have to figure out what you wanna do next. And the procedures you choose to do today will have an effect on what your options are going to be later on. There's, and I didn't put all the options that are up here, but an interesting one is the irreversible electroporation Nanoknife, and I think we may have had a presentation here about this. And it's interesting, similar to cryo, cryo and some of the other treatments are dealing with heat or cold and destroying the cancer cells within the prostate. The Nanoknife treatment is using an electrical impulse that actually perforates the cells of the cancer, and the cancers then die. They can't maintain their life without the membrane around the cancer cell. And so it breaks up the cancer cell. And so it's the least damaging to other cells and parts of your body and your prostate. And so the side effects are minimal compared to a lot of other treatments. And an interesting thing is, as it breaks up the cancer cells and the cancer cells kind of fall apart, your body's immune system sees this and recognizes it as something that's not good and somewhat foreign in your body and goes and attacks it to clean it out. And then what it starts to do is your immune system starts to teach itself those cells are bad. So therefore, it starts going after other prostate cells that may have not been killed by this process. And apparently the other treatments don't break up the cancer cells in the same fashion, and so there's not the remnants left over for the immune system to attack and learn about. And some of this is theoretical, and there isn't a lot of empirical data about it, but a lot of the doctors are saying, yeah, you know what, this is actually something we're recognizing. And then there's the immunotherapy types of drugs, and there's all kinds of different ones out there. There's a little bit of caution on that. There are some side effects associated with that. It can affect your thyroid and some other parts of your body. So I haven't really investigated combining that with one of the treatments I'm considering. But right now, actually, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm at a point where, I'm at a 5.14 PSA. It's contained. I've got a little bit of time. I mean, cancer for me has, it's basically slow growing, but it's something I can't ignore. And I'm actually somewhat open to suggestions or questions or comments if anybody has some.
Who does the
Locally, it's Dr. Ross Schwartzberg, and he does it. He's been trained by Dr. Stelling out of Germany. And Dr. Stelling has done 650 of these in Germany and in the United States. And so he's got a decent track record as far as number of treatments. And he actually will come here. He does come here and sit side by side with Dr. Schwartzberg as the procedure is occurring. He can't physically touch it because he's not licensed here, but he's shoulder to shoulder with Dr. Schwartzberg. And so that's the treatment he does. Lyle. Yeah, Ross Schwartzberg.
What did your MPMRI show you that he's only died?
The MP-MRI showed the cancer, and Dr. Schwartzberg did this, contained in the prostate, in the same area where it was before I had my radiation treatment. It basically grew back in the same location. It's about the same size. You know, it's very interesting. It's almost in the exact same location it was before. And it hasn't gone any further outside of that. So the radiation obviously didn't kill all the cells. So over the last 7 years, they grew back. Yes.
Have you decided at what PSA level you'll have to make a decision on which treatment to get?
You know, I'm not really waiting for it to hit a higher PSA level. I'm trying to make a decision in the next 30 to 60 days. The one thing about the Nanoknife, it's not covered by any insurance. It's a $30,000 expense. And so I'm going to have to, you know, dig deep to take on that treatment. And the doctor comes here once every few months to do it. And so he's coming in 3 weeks. And so, and I've been on, you know, Skype conference calls with him and met with Dr. Schwartzberg half a dozen times. So going through all the evaluation right now, whether I want to go that path.
Have you ever thought about finasteride or glutamide? My doctor's got me on both of those. Hormone therapy, I guess it is, but it's not as aggressive as AET.
You know, I've thought about it, and it's still something that's in my consideration, whether I want to go with that type of treatment, you know, be it ADT or something similar. And my sense is that it will buy me more time. And I'm trying to decide, do I go the route where I'm buying more time and maybe that will resolve it? Or do I go and attack it and try to get rid of it before using these other procedures that would be, as one of my doctors said, those are kind of ones you want to do later on after these other procedures in 10 years, you know, hasn't solved it. Finally.
Did you ever talk to Dr. Rossi about proton?
I did not. The feedback I've gotten on proton is it's another delivery system of radiation. The proton therapy, is that what you're talking about?
I would prefer that over Nanoknife or CyberKnife, whatever you call that. The reason is that the CyberKnife is high dose radiation, fewer treatments, higher dosage.
Right.
They could cause more damage to the surrounding organ.
And the Nanoknife and the CyberKnife are different things. So the CyberKnife is radiation. The Nanoknife is actually not radiation. They stick these. It's kind of like the HDR or where they put these probes inside of you, and they use an electrical impulse that's extremely targeted into the prostate where the prostate cancer is, and then breaks up the cancer cells. So there's no actual radiation. And the issue is, I've had radiation. Now, one option is HDR. I mean, Dr. Enck said, you know, they could do it, or I could go up to UCLA, and I forget the name of the doctor at UCLA that do it. I'm trying to get my insurance company to cover that. But HDR is one application as well of getting short-term high-dose radiation to the targeted spot. Again, I've had radiation, so I have to be careful about how much more radiation I put inside my body.
Have you had consultations with physicians about these other therapies, like the cryotherapy? Have you actually had an evaluation whether you're
Yeah, I'm doing that now. I have talked to, and again, in any of these treatments, having a doctor that has a lot of experience in this is really important. The one I spoke to didn't have a lot of experience in it. And so it's like, okay, well, you're not really giving me the answers I'm looking for. I think I need to talk to somebody else. So I'm kind of, in fact, I've even considered going back to Dr. Bond and getting his opinion.
Yes, do that.
Okay.
Go back to Bond.
Go back to Bond. All right.
We've also had presentations about local laser ablation as possibly being a backup plan for.
And where is that done? I remember.
Well, there's the Desert Medical.
Oh, Desert, okay, or Palm Desert, okay.
People are getting a consultation there.
Okay.
With regard to radiation therapy, personally for myself, if I was in your situation, I would probably rule it out because you've already had a failure. And
Yeah.
so your cancer cells might be more resistant to radiation therapy, so why do the same thing twice? That has failed once.
Right.
Just my general
No,
feeling
good.
about it.
Okay, great, thank you.
What was recommended for me in a very similar situation was Casodex or Epidon. And I worked for 10 years. It's not that disturbing as Lupron. Okay, Bill Manning's going to have to leave his video equipment and come down here. And he's one of our leaders of active surveillance. It used to be called watchful waiting, which gave him the impression you stay home and just sit there and watch TV. Now he does active surveillance, so let's hear about that. And then he's going to close with his personal experiences that may be of interest to you. Thank you.
Well, I thought this picture kind of represented kind of the abyss that you look into when you're trying to figure out what to do. And that definitely includes active surveillance, because here you're basically taking all this advice that you get from different doctors and family and trying to figure out what's the best course to do. So I'm 65 years old. 2009, I applied for some life insurance extension, and my PSA came back 4.1, and that was the magic number that basically said, you were SOL, no insurance for you, bud. So I thought I would show them up and go get a second PSA, which unfortunately came back 6.1. So that ended the life insurance extension and sent me on this current journey I'm on now, because at that point my urologist insisted on a biopsy. So I had one. As you can see, I had 12 cores. They found 5% in one sample, Gleason 3+3, and basically recommended surgery because I was, in fact, such a great candidate. It had a bit of a conveyor belt feel to me. He said, yes, radiation, and oh yeah, I guess there's this watchful waiting thing if, you really want to do that. So at that point, I decided to start educating myself. And one of the first major influences that I came across was the China study. But the biggie was coming here. I did belong to a Kaiser support group. However, it was a bit limited as far as what information was available, and so it was recommended that I come to this meeting, and that was definitely a godsend. I learned quite a bit in just the first meeting that I came to. So in October of 2009, I visited Dr. Bond, had a color Doppler ultrasound, and he said that he recommended active surveillance for me. He did not see anything worthy of jumping on the conveyor belt. His term was actually, what he saw was, quote, clinically insignificant, which sounded just fine to me. So I informed the surgeon that I was going to pass and move on to step 2. So it's said that one thing that should be of concern to people is if there's any family history of prostate cancer. So this might have been a little jarring for some folks, because in 2010, I learned that both of my birth parents died of cancer in their 60s. I also learned that an uncle died of prostate cancer, but we don't know at what age. So that didn't deter me. I went for my second color Doppler in 2010, and Dr. Bond said everything still looked okay. I did have some cells that were a little suspicious, but certainly nothing that warranted treatment. So I decided that I would continue with that. At that time, he measured my prostate, came out to 67 cc's, a bit on the large side. He also had me do what's called a PSA 3 test. It's not widely used, but it's got some people, including Bond, who was in favor of it. It came back negative, so that was just another tool in the toolbox to justify no treatment. So my PSA ranged from 4.13 to 5.2 in that particular year. So next we have 2011 to 2012. So now my PSA was jumping around like the old ball did on the lyrics that would go at the bottom of the songs on TV, you know, and that's pretty much how my PSA did. My annual DREs were all negative. 2012, I went to see Dr. Bond again, and he recommended that I have a biopsy at that time, which I did not want to do. We finally compromised, and I said, well, if you find something that really looks suspicious, okay, I'll do it. Well, lo and behold, he found something that he considered suspicious. It was, in fact, in the same area of the prostate where my original one sample had been found. So I said, okay, go ahead. And he did a targeted biopsy. He did, oh, wait a minute, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's coming up next. That was on number 4. I apologize. So 2013, same thing, PSA, still pretty much in the same range. DRE, negative, so I was on number 4 that he said do the biopsy. I did. It was seven cores and targeted in the area that was, quote, suspicious, and it all came up negative. So just for grins, I sent it off for a second opinion, and it came back negative. So technically, I know I did not have prostate cancer. So I guess at that point, I could have packed up my video camera and just stayed home on all my Saturdays. But, you know, I still got a few more years to put in to get my pension, so I'm sticking around here for a while. Gene says I have to. 2014, 15, my PSA suddenly shot up to 7.5. And I might add, by the way, my first urologist said, you should have an annual biopsy, and I said, no, thank you. And by the 3rd year, he was still recommending it, and my PSA had just gone down. And so I asked him, so if my PSA goes up, I should have a biopsy. And if my PSA goes down, I should have a biopsy. I can't quite connect those dots. And he finally relented and said, okay, fine. And luckily, he then retired. I got a new doctor that I didn't have to have that argument with. So 2014, 7.5, but then it went back down to 6.1. 2015, 6, but oh, it shot back up to 7.1. And actually, I should pause for just a second and back up to the beginning, because when I was first diagnosed, it was jarring to me, but not overwhelming. I was not panicked. To me, it was more of a problem that had to be solved rather than something devastating. My wife did not share my opinion at that time and thought I was basically out of my mind. You treat cancer. period. That's all. It's that cut and dry. And so we made a deal that we would research together, and we would look up everything we could, learn everything we could. And then by the end of that year, 2009, she was fully on board with it. And then she even joined in my attitude of, I guess you might call, resentment, that I was put up into a position of jumping into surgery, which could have had, probably would have had, life-altering consequences when there was really no reason for it at all, period. So she became a full supporter of this philosophy and is very supportive of what I do and certainly what the group does. Back to 2015. So PSA's gone higher than it ever has, but it's also gone back down again. DRE, negative. This was the first year I got my first MPMRI at Imaging Healthcare Specialist with Dr. Schwartzberg. Results, negative. Same sort of thing, that, yeah, there are some messed up cells in here, but we really cannot call them cancer. He gave me a PRAD2 diagnosis. If you're not familiar with that, it's a grading system that they use for the MRIs, basically 1 being, you know, pop the champagne, 5 being, well, we'll see you tomorrow. So 2 is very low, nothing to be concerned about. So I was very happy to hear about that. Okay, 2016, as you can see, it was 5.9, and then, whoa, it shot up to 8.7. So that could possibly be a little panic button to hit. Never been that high, and this was only within 6 months. But I've seen this kind of thing so often, it just became routine. And I think I glossed over it on one of the other slides, but the last time they measured my prostate, it was up to 80 cc's. So no big surprise there. In fact, Dr. Bond said early on, because it was so large, that relative to its size, my PSA could have been between 7 and 9 and considered normal for that size. So another reason not to panic just because it's suddenly 8.7. And then 2017, it went down to 7.7, went down to 6.8. I had my annual DRE, fine. So I went for my second MPMRI in 2017. Again, results negative. Again, PRAD2. This is getting pretty boring, isn't it? And so, any rate, I've felt very strongly all along about these tools as maintaining my active surveillance. Just for grins, that's my PSA, starting in 2005. Actually, I have it all the way back to 2001, but it kind of screws the chart up, so I left it off. It was lower, obviously. So you can see, you know, there's an obvious upward trend over the last, 12 years. And all the peaks and all the valleys, it's just, for me personally, it's kind of routine. This is, quote, normal for me. And this is why I can't panic and haven't panicked at any time when I suddenly get a spike. Now, if it keeps going up 3, 4, 5 times in a row, I still won't panic, but it's going to require a different plan. But for now, this is what I'm doing. So 2018, I had a test in January. It went down even more to 5.6, all the way back down to where it was several years ago. It's certainly, when you look at a lot of the things that are used as reasons for why your PSA can go up, one that comes up is stress. And to say that I've been under a little bit of stress would be a big understatement. So if that were the case, I would have expected that thing to go up. That makes sense. And it went down. So, you know, it's something personal to me, but it just reinforces the whole idea that active surveillance makes a hell of a lot of sense for very low-risk men, of which I am one, and low-risk men, which is still a pretty big group. And then after that, yes, it's a whole different ballgame. But not hopping on the conveyor belt was the smartest thing I ever did, and it is also this group that has been instrumental in keeping that alive. And I'll be around whether I get a pension or not. So, at any rate, that's that. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Did you change your eating habits, beef and stuff like that?
Yes, I did. I kind of glossed over that. There was one line item in one of the slides that talked about that. Yes, in 2009, I already ate healthy anyway. So I did go on what I call a modified vegan diet. And I've been on it ever since for the last 7 years. By modified, I mean I cheat with some eggs now and then. So I had no problem getting rid of the meat at all. If you'd asked me to get rid of whiskey, that'd have been a different story. But fact is that you know, my weight went down, my cholesterol went down. I felt great, and you know, I'll admit it's some work, and sometimes it's a hell of a lot of work. When my wife and I took a vacation to Yosemite, that was quite challenging because not much of that stuff around unless you want to eat salad, and that is not being vegetarian. That's actually just dumb. So you have to do a lot of work and a lot of modifications sometimes to accommodate this. But yes, that's the one thing I do. Do I take any medications of any kind? No. Yes?
What would you say is the error rate of that number? You know, does it rely upon maybe the operator, the machine that's used, or evaluating the sample?
I'm not sure I quite understand your question. What error?
You have a 5.6, let's say. If it's given to another operator or just a second day of the same sample, maybe 5.7, 5.8 versus 5.4.
Well, are you talking about the PSA test? I don't think there's a huge variation in laboratories as far as how that goes. And even if one lab said 5.6 and another said 5.8, that's really no big deal. Mr. George.
That graph you showed rising was the issue you overlaid the size of your prostate.
Yes, in fact, I did that before and I forgot to do it on this one. But in the early part, I have no idea. Under the first biopsy, it was, I think, around 60, and then it went to 67, and then years later, again, it went to 80. Oh, well, and in fact, actually, if you'll notice, says DRE postponed until June. Nobody asked me about that. My urologist, looking at all this stuff, he said, you know what? I don't think we even need to bother with this for right now. We'll just do it in June, and that'll be fine. And he said, by the way, when I looked at your report from Imaging Healthcare, the MRI, he said they measured your prostate again, and he said, I don't want you to take this 100% because it was a little hard to know for sure. It was Dr. Bond that actually gave me the 80. In this particular MRI, he said it was a little harder, but they said it could be as large as 100. So.
All right, I think you need to shift now to your other story.
Oh, okay. All right, so.
Talk about stress.
let's talk about stress. Isn't that fun? Okay, so George already spilled the beans. My wife and I lost our house in the Lilac Fire. We lived up in the Bonsall Fallbrook area. And I have learned a great deal about this experience. And Gene and George wanted me to basically share some parts of this. The story itself is pretty long. So as far as what happened that day, we saw some smoke. My wife had been out on a porch, and she goes, "Hey, well, look at this." And I went out and looked at it, and I went, "Oh dear." And I started loading stuff in the car. And we waited for a little bit, and there was neighbors out looking at it, and went back and looked at it again, and there was more smoke. And I went, "That's it." So all the stuff went into the car. Now, as far as the stuff going into the car, last summer, you should recall we had a really, really bad heat wave. And there was a lot of red flag warnings all over the place. So we decided at that time that we were going to prepare ourselves. So a lot of the stuff that we had scattered all over the house, we put into bins. A lot of stuff that I had, I put into a cabinet, which I'll tell you about in a minute, and basically come up with a plan. During that summer, we actually already had stuff loaded in our car. It was so hot, so dry, and windy, sorry about that, we thought, this is it. Turned out it was false alarm. We left that stuff in our cars for like 2 weeks. And finally we went, I think we're okay, so we unloaded it. Meanwhile, you heard about the Santa Rosa fire. Well, my wife's cousin, one of her cousins, they lost their house along with 6,000 other homes in that fire. Yeah, and that's 6 with 3 zeros after it. And, you know, we said at the time that we had no idea what it would feel like to lose everything. And now we do. And it's pretty devastating, frankly. But the flip side of that is that, you know, you don't really have time to, you know, wallow in, you know, sympathy or anything else. You've really got too much to do and too many things. So back to preparation. So we prepared all this stuff. It was obvious the fire was starting. I started throwing everything into the car, which I might mention, the first thing that went in the car was my 1966 Fender Jazz bass guitar. No way I was leaving that guy. We've been together for over 40 years, so there's no way that's gonna stay or get missed. I grabbed some of my computers, most of them. I grabbed my video cameras, not my tripod, and a whole host of other stuff. There wasn't room. And then we grabbed all these bins that we had prepared and just filled our cars. And here's lesson number 1. As prepared as you may want to be or think you are, what happens when you're suddenly faced with this is the prospect of freezing, of just locking up and not being able to focus, and in worst case, panicking. And that's the thing you really got to avoid doing, is panicking, because then you make mistakes. So as we're putting all of our stuff in, my wife was not quite as focused as she wanted to be. And you start kind of wandering around the house going, what do I grab? What do I grab? So you've got to figure all this stuff out well in advance, and so it's a mechanical, just do it without thinking, because the more you have to think at that point, the bigger the chances you're going to screw up. So anyway, very quickly, we're watching our neighbors out there gawking at this thing, and we're driving off. It's the hell with this. But here's lesson number 2. Both of us thought subconsciously that it's, you know, we're going to come back to the house. You know, I even suffered from some of this too. I was in my office. I had all kinds of stuff up there I could have easily grabbed. But I grabbed all the big important stuff, thankfully, and off we went. Well, I could have grabbed even some more small memento stuff and some other things. I mean, it's great to have a computer that you've saved, but you don't have a mouse, you don't have a keyboard. You don't even have a power cord to turn the sucker on with. So, you know, lesson number 2 is that you've got to take all of these things, you know, into consideration. So we load up the car, we go, we park, you know, about a mile away, and essentially watch all these houses burn down. Confirmed that evening on the news, helicopter shots, yep, that's where it was, right there. So we lost a hell of a lot, but we saved a lot too because of being prepared. And that's something that everybody in this room ought to think about, because if you think that could never happen to you, you're wrong. If you live in Southern California, other than the Brego Desert, it can happen to you. There's a hell of a lot of people in Santa Rosa that don't live in high fire risk districts like we did, and they lost their homes too. So it's something you really seriously have to address. And that gets to lesson number 3. During the summer, when we had this first scare, I went around and I took pictures of every damn thing in our house. And I'm not talking about just rooms. I'm talking about going up to your china hutch and taking pictures of all those valuable things in there, which you may or may not get money for, and I'll get to that in a minute. I'm talking about opening up drawers. I'm talking about some insurance companies are going to want to get it down to the point, if you want to get any kind of money, you better know how many hangers you had in the closet. So pictures of everything, your garage, the drawers, the kitchen. Open up the cupboards, your appliances. Have a record of all of it. And then make a backup of your record and put that somewhere. So, at any rate, about a week after the fire, we were allowed back on the property. Nothing left. It's all ashes and melted crap. Fire got so hot, it literally twisted and melted our cast iron skillets. That takes a lot of heat to do something like that. Oh, but guess what was still standing?
Three drawer.
My 2-drawer fireproof filing cabinet. It was black. The sides were kind of wonky a little bit. But I pointed to it to my wife, and she went, "Oh my God." Now, why did she say, "Oh my God"? Well, because I bought that thing years and years ago, and she thought it was a joke. She said, "Nothing is going to survive an intense fire." And I went, "Well, you know, maybe not, but I'm certainly going to try." Well, lo and behold, there it was in its sort of ugly, mangled beauty. And the only problem was the lock was melted, so my key was of no good. I couldn't open the drawers because it was all melted around the front, but there were a lot of firemen wandering around trying to help people. They were from the Paula Indian Reservation. They were from the local North County people. They were guys from Utah. I mean, it was just all over the map, and they were fabulous. So they asked, "Can we help?" I went, "Well, you have a chop saw?" And I went, "Sure, of course." Chop saw being those big giant saws that they use to cut off the tops of cars when they roll over and they need to pull somebody out. So they brought their chop saw over. I even got video on my phone of this. It's amazing. And the jaws of life, big hydraulic wedges that they put in to separate metal. And they worked for 20 minutes on that cabinet trying to get the top off. And they did. And then they went down and fished the stuff out, and 3/4 of my papers survived. Most of my computer disks were kind of bad, not usable. And all my computer backup hard drives were fine. So that's the next suggestion I would have is when you have things that you would want to bring with you, important papers, valuables. Oh, I had memorabilia in that cabinet. Stuff that was, very important as far as the family goes. The Purple Heart my uncle got from Pearl Harbor. A lot of other little interesting things all survived. So the thing is that, it's one thing to figure out what do I need to take with me. And there's websites that tell you, make suggestions on this. I'm not going to go there. But the thing to consider is that you can always think, well, I'll just grab this and I'll go. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't always work. If you are on vacation, that morning, we were going to go buy a Christmas tree. And we would have been gone for at least an hour at approximately the time the fire broke out. I had a bad feeling, and I said, we're not going this morning. We're staying home. There you go. I had a bad feeling the night before. I put stuff by the back door, just in case. This was what they called a purple flag warning. You've probably never heard of a purple flag. You've heard of yellow flag, red flag, never heard of purple. And the reason is it's never been used before, ever. This fire was so intense because of all the wind. If it hadn't been for the wind, then probably nothing would have happened. They would have got the fire out and that'd been it. Wind was ferocious, just ferocious, which made this like a fire tidal wave, basically. So the thing is that it's good to plan for what you'd grab if you had to leave. But you also have to think about what could I protect if I weren't home? Because a whole lot of people lost stuff because they weren't home. And in fact, there were guys even where we lived that lost everything because they were down on the golf course. They were down on the golf course watching this go on until some sheriffs came through and started yelling, evacuate. Well, too late to grab anything at that point other than your car and maybe your dog and get out of there. So the thing is that, in my opinion, having some kind of protection in your home for these valuable things that you may or may not be able to get out of the home is something to consider. So I've probably touched on most of it. Oh, the insurance. The insurance company is not your friend. They're not necessarily your enemy, but they're not your friend. And in the beginning, you can hear a lot of very comforting words, sorry for your loss, blah, blah, blah. But the fact is the insurance company is a business. They are there to make money. And a lot of that stems from watching their losses, charging you according to risk. Or in cases like this, putting you through the ringer as far as making a claim goes. It's a long, complicated subject. I've had people ask me, well, what do you think of the insurance companies? Well, insurance companies are like doctors. There's some really good ones, and there's some really crappy ones. And what you need to do is look at your insurance company, your insurance policy, and read the fine print. One thing that we found out is that on your declaration page, it gives you all your limits. Oh, you get this for your house, this for your personal property, you get this much for loss of use. Important part of your policy, loss of use, meaning all of a sudden you're in a hotel, who's going to pay for that? All of a sudden you have to rent a house for a year, who's going to pay for that? Things you need to know. At the bottom of the declaration page, you'll see a lot of hieroglyphics of all these codes. And basically what those codes are is they tell you what you're actually insured for. Your policy may state all kinds of stuff. Oh, about, antiques and rare paintings and all this other stuff. Well, that doesn't mean you're covered for it. What you're covered for is what's on the declaration page. So you need to go through and decipher it or have your agent decipher it, because you may think that $5,000 Marantz receiver you had restored is going to be covered because they cover electronics. Well, no, it isn't. It's not going to be covered. they're going to go for just the basics. If you have special stuff, jewelry and everything that's very, very valuable, you have to get a writer to pay extra to have that stuff covered. Your basic stuff means basic, and it varies by insurance company. When they're going to replace stuff, is it going to be a replacement value? Is it going to be average cost? There's many different ways they can interpret how and what they're going to replace. So it's a good idea to sit down and go through this, and if you can't figure it out, which most people can't, then have your agent tell you what it is. And most importantly, have them tell you what's not covered. And that's when you're going to suddenly discover a lot of stuff that you thought would be covered isn't. And in the case of if you just have damage to your home, not too much gray area there. Just like your car being damaged, you go in and you either get it fixed or it gets totaled. A house, especially if you lose the whole damn thing and everything in it, I was told by this one insurance agent that the way you look at personal property is imagine your house as a structure. The structure is covered. All right, so turn it upside down and shake it, and everything that falls out is your personal property. And that's where you have to then look at, so in other words, my refrigerator falls out, so it's not covered in the house. Well, of course it's not. It fell out. So it's a good analogy to think of as far as how to address what category everything goes in, because it isn't one big happy family policy that, oh, I'll just get everything replaced, because it doesn't work that way. So, like I said, the pictures, document everything, go through your policy, have your agent explain everything, and use that question. What happens if the whole damn thing burns down? What do I get? How much are you going to pay for me to live somewhere else? And all of these kinds of things. So that's probably where I should cut it, because I could keep going for quite a while.
Where are you now? What are you going to do?
We're in a rental, a home up in Escondido. I might add that our first night that we spent there, it was an unfurnished rental, so there's another thing you got to think about. We went into this house and we spent our first night with 2 folding chairs and a bed. That's it. Nothing to cook with, no silverware, no pencils, no nothing, just that. So what our step at this point is, we've managed to buy a bunch of stuff and put some furnishings in and function on a normal level, somewhat normal. And working with our insurance company finally did settle with us. They're going to give us the money. They were going to have us do a personal inventory of every stinking thing that was in the house. And worse, not only did you have to list it, but then they'll depreciate it on top of that. So even though you've got this big giant limit that sounds like, oh, you're going to get all this money if you lose everything, well, maybe. Now, luckily, they just got tired of hassling and they cut that money loose. As far as our home goes, we're going to have it rebuilt. That's another huge, long story. It involves the insurance company, a lender. They've now want to get out of it completely, the insurance company. So they just want to give us our money and go away. And, for the most part, that's okay, but it's not quite that simple. So we're figuring we'll be in this rental for the next minimum of 6 months, probably 8, maybe 12. And we have loss of use money that luckily covers that.
Okay, thank you.